Yeah, I'm doing good. It's great seeing you guys.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on. So you're the co-founder of Sphere, which is building seamless stablecoin powered rails for global commerce. So you guys started Sphere in 2022, and from what I saw on the internet, it was kind of out of a personal need for faster remittance between US and Korea. So wondering if you can kind of speed run us through kind of how that early need and insight has grown into the kind of like full cross-border payments OS you guys have today.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's easier to kind of connect the dots looking back. When we first started, we definitely didn't realize, oh wow, this is very similar to what our families went through when we were growing up. When we first started, Luna Terra had basically just happened, and from first principles, we were like, seems like things are going down. What kind of makes sense via unified ledger? And we landed on payments. Ended up submitting a hackathon project kind of as a throwaway. I was like Stripe Solana. Somehow won, and then had the blessing and curse of trying to fundraise and create the company as FTX collapsed. And so, a lot of great filters, I suppose, along the way. Maybe the last one during that early stage was during the whole regional banking crisis. Um, and we realized, holy crap, most of the customers that we were planning on selling, we had won the Stripe for crypto hackathon, not very creative. So we're like, all right, maybe we should try making a Stripe for crypto, which in retrospect was not a good business idea, because the TAM at the time was like 30 companies. Everyone else had like either, run out of money or pivoted to AI, and frankly didn't really want to talk to us. The people who did want to talk to us, and at this point we're like a 4-person company, um, deeply unqualified to be talking to some of these people coming from the emerging world, and they're running like multi-million dollar like banks, like brick and mortar tech companies, anything from like silverware to like oil, and yet they're really excited to talk to us. And my Spanish was like okay, my Portuguese is like not that great, and yet they're very interested in learning more. And so we end up kind of pulling trigger and just going to live there. So over the last few years, a lot of the insight and conviction into stablecoins and building out that operating system for the emerging world has come from on the ground, I guess, alpha. Like, what do people really care about beyond understanding stablecoins at a high level? What are some of the very unsexy, boring problems that they run into when getting like a dollar account or a bank account in a different country, or trying to scale, like an oil payment from where they are to a different region? And so, yeah, I'd say in retrospect, it kind of makes sense because of the overlap between these types of customers, where we spend time with our kids, hang out playing board games on weekend nights. Uh, that starts to resemble like, holy shit, that's what we went through. But when we first started, it was more of a first principles exercise with a lot of lucky coincidences, or maybe unlucky, in deciding to stick through it.
What a great answer. I love that. So, I mean, we're obviously in this time when like stablecoin seems to be the consensus trade, circle pumping, L1's launching, all this sort of stuff. And clearly from your answer there, you guys have been uh, building for people that were there even before the rest of the world has sort of caught up. And obviously it's you know, you can take a fairly simple look at stable coins and saying, it's US dollars or it's just a stable coin. But if you kind of get under the hood and you think about all the pieces that are required to actually make those stable coins useful, I think there's a lot more scale in the niche there, I think, than most people realize. So, whether that's the on ramps, off ramps, compliance, risk, hedging, etc. So, I guess I'm curious, how are you thinking about strategically approaching the sort of evolution of the product in this new era that we're in?
Yeah. What's fascinating is I remember when we first started, people thought it was a really dumb idea to build in stablecoins. And now people think it's a really good idea. But when we go to certain, I guess, like places and try to convince people to use this stuff, what's fascinating is that the number of people who are also there to kind of help onboard, educate, bring them on as customers, that hasn't really changed, despite it being a lot more popular now to build in stablecoin land. And from first principles, the demographics, I think, end up being kind of like a weird impetus for this. You think like a really smart guy from like MIT or from like Stanford, maybe they have a TradFi background and so they live in like New York City or something. Um, even if like issuance because of Genius or bank appetite because of regulatory clarity is a lot more favorable now. I guess like the weird, maybe beautiful or terrifying truth is that these types of operators kind of don't want to go and live in Libya. They kind of it like starts to structurally make sense why no one else is in these rooms, and it's because the motion is so strange, and you end up doing a lot of work that doesn't really feel like normal startup stuff. Maybe the most similar theme is doing things that don't scale and to an insane level. But I suppose like despite it becoming more popular, which does make it easier to have certain convos, especially with counterparties in the developed side of the world, who are still important to keep the entrances and the exits on. It feels like we're quite a while away. At least we haven't really seen anyone else in those rooms. And a couple of years ago is LATAM, which has become a lot more popular of a trade since. Strangely, I'd still say the pie is still quite far to go from being fully saturated. But if you think about like other regions as well, I think we have a long ways to go before that, YC founder is down to spend potentially the rest of his life in a country where the quality of life is way worse in comparison to, a New York City or an SF. So I'm hoping that changes with time as the opportunities become more present and the local infrastructure develops alongside these themes. But I suspect in the next 6 to 18 months, maybe 24 months, probably most of it is like 5-10% incremental improvements from incumbents who are trying to figure out like what should their stablecoin strategy be. Like we all know that this thing is probably useful in some end state, but it'll be quite a while before we get like maybe you could describe it as the next two step functions where we go from what like 5,000 perps traders and maybe like 10 to 100,000 active CT accounts to billions of people depending on this invisibly every day.
I'm curious in these emerging markets what the most acute need for stablecoins are, and does it differ across them?
Um, Probably it's like the usual suspects. So it's like access to the world's reserve currency. It's a good store of value. There are a lot of like basic financial primitives that would be useful: yield generation, the ability to borrow, basically underwrite credit. I remember spending time in a favela in Brazil, and like a lot of people don't have IDs. So how do you KYC them? How do you like underwrite their credit? Um, if the country doesn't really have a strong rule of law, how do you underwrite credit when no one can really go after them? Um, so a lot of the basic usual suspects are what people want. I think part of the issue is the form factor in which people are kind of like working on distributing to them is very similar to the way that how it's always been done. Like if you go to like SF and you build out a product, and if the product's really good, you basically have this audience of like cracked out technical people who are used to switching products and who like know what to buy and know how to go through like vendor RFP. But if you're going to a country that hit internet penetration past 50% in the last 5 to 10 years, simply the onboarding education motion, it looks super different, and it's maybe frustrating if you're used to like kind of building something awesome and having your customers come to it. As as a like broader comment, for what it's worth, I could totally be wrong. This is just what I'm seeing. But as a broader comment, I feel like since the 2000s, post.com version of it, it feels like entrepreneurship has become a lot more professionalized. And so there are these like lessons and like books and like themes that people are taught to like kind of digest and absorb. But a lot of those rules I don't think apply very well in nascent markets because the counterparty just looks super different, whether it's culturally or by resource budget, maybe you could describe it as, or the way things scale up there. So I know that sounds super vague, but happy to dive in. It generalizes across a bunch of different regions, but hopefully that's an interesting comment.
Very interesting comment. Yeah, I think it for me we actually had a conversation yesterday sort of about AI wrapper tools for say video production, and it seems like there's a similar dynamic here, right? Where as soon as all the techies are able to go do it, the edge is always going to be, I guess the arbitrage seems like it's going to get a lot smaller, and yet the wrong takeaway from that is that arbitrage has gone from your go-to-market or marketing or like how you might go build your product. And in fact, it's just probably not in the obvious places. And where it is obvious, it's going to get competed away very quickly. But the world is very big. The needs of people are, I mean, this whole thing around, oh, AI is just going to take away humans' jobs and stuff like brother, the problems we have in this world, my friend, just continue to grow. And, there's all these new opportunities. It's just not probably going to be delivered to you via your preferred social media app. So yeah, I love that answer. I'm curious about your business here. And I think one of the, well, maybe I'll just ask the question. Are you guys going to launch your own stablecoin? Is that a core part of how you see building this business, or are you still just going to be on the software services side of things?
Yeah, probably not going to get into the issuance business. We have a bunch of issuer partners that we really like. I guess it's most of them. But yeah, issuance is a hard game, and we've tried to think about it from first principles, as well as study the history of general asset creation, whether it's money market funds, mutual funds, kind of like this the traditional assets that we have combined, whether it's a yield bearing instrument or a payment instrument, and we now have this hybrid that we call a stablecoin. At least for what we're good at, I think we'll stick to the delivery of these coins, make it super easy for someone in the emerging world to get access to a dollar account and to be able to send it to friends, family to grow their business. But at least we ourselves don't today want to create our own stable. That seems more within the territory of a large bank or a large corporate, or even a DeFi protocol that has some user capture. You could kind of summarize us as for crypto natives, a very fast on and off ramp is our bread and butter. And as an orchestrator, we'll kind of go and figure out, do the legwork on who's good to do money transmission or the regulated activity per the region you're coming from. Ends up being pretty annoying. On the non-crypto native side, you could think of us as an alternative to the usual suspects for cross-border payments, whether it's directly within Swift in your bank, or through a traditional fintech that might have liquidity constraints or tends to focus on developed regions because to their credit, these are the largest markets. These will have the largest TAMs. Maybe a good heuristic to kind of describe that and loop back to the start of the convo for why we started. My co-founder spent a lot of his childhood in the Bahamas. The total market for that is 300,000 people. GDP is about $1 billion. It's still relatively nascent compared to New York City, or pick your favorite, London. So yeah, if you're Stripe or Shopify, probably not worth it to go to Bahamas and serve the crap out of it. And it's those structural gaps where we find it fascinating to squeeze juice, because I think startup people call it the innovator's dilemma. But it's more just the market. I don't know if there's a different phrase for this. It's just the market isn't worth it for an incumbent. It might be worth it for a startup. But even for a startup, there are usual resource constraints that make it hard to reach. Things like stablecoins level the playing field and make a lot of these previously untouchable markets touchable. And so, yes, that's the general design philosophy we take when describing the business to crypto natives or to non-crypto natives.
I'm curious if you could give us a sense of what's the right metric to track stablecoin adoption today, and then how do you where does the 10x from that come from?
Yeah, I'd be very careful of overall volume, because the truth is I could run a bot, pay $10 and generate $1 trillion of volume on a given chain. And if you look deeply, it's so hard to track some of this volume. If you look very deeply and heuristically, yeah, it might not be the best proxy for real adoption. I think it's pretty unsexy, and it's very hard to track, which probably makes it a good metric, which is to say net new users, someone who's created a wallet or is leveraging someone else's wallet and is meaningfully spending more, call it, of daily time or monthly time, sending value through this new type of instrument or just holding the value. There are a couple of ways you can frame it granularly. It's to what extent, how many hours per month do they spend in their traditional financial app? It could be a mobile money app versus within their wallet. How much stablecoin flow? That's probably a little bit smaller certainly under like a 10 mil tranche, is flowing from a country that doesn't have great correspondent relationships to another one. Kind of happy to elaborate on like why this data is so hard to track, and you could probably guess as to the retail side. But it's partially because the comparatives on the traditional fiat system, the way that you get that data is permissioned. So it's like very difficult to know like how many human hours are being saved for flow that would otherwise go through correspondence. To me, that's the best metric, and we have like proxies that are like decent for that. An incumbent app that like in some emerging market that like probably would be pretty uninteresting to a large incumbent in the developed world, but net using stable coins and not in like a trivial way, which is something that we also try to watch out for. Like if you just like integrate stable coins into your app, but like no one uses it, to me, that's not very interesting. But I think the incentive structure today kind of orients or biases towards that, because now you can tell all your shareholders, you can tell the market, hey, we're using stable coins and we're on top of it. But there's no sacrifice being made to drive the adoption for it.
Interesting. All right, man. I think we got to leave it there. I've got a million more questions, so maybe we'll get you back on when time permits in the future. I think just a comment on today's show, and I think you're a great representative of this, Arnold. It's just like the level of and depth of thought that founders are bringing to these markets right now. I think there's sort of like has been this history of maybe cowboy capitalism in crypto, and I think the guests we've had on today, including yourself, Arnold, are just show like the depth and belief, and authenticity with which you're going after trying to solve these problems, and that makes me just ridiculously bullish on where this industry is going. So thanks for showing up today and sharing your insight with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Listen to my ramblings. Hopefully some people found it interesting. And
I certainly did. So at the very least, you have two happy
Cam of two, baby, and you're willing to serve it. Thank you.
Right off track.
All right, well, go check out Sphere Labs on X, and you can dive down the rabbit hole with Arnold there. Thanks, Ben.
Of course. Thank you, guys.